Hello, everyone. I am Kari the Mortician, and this is Victims of Crime, where we choose a well-known death case to hypothetically discuss how to care for a body in that condition with a panel of embalmers. So yes, we cover the case a little bit, but our primary goal is to discuss things we would need to consider in the matter of death and other factors in preparing that person for a viewing and a funeral. In each episode, I try to highlight a different manner of death or scenario to pose new challenges to the panel. So we've covered hangings, shootings, drownings, so many different types of deaths. So today we're going to be discussing the death of Elizabeth Short, or also known as the Black Dahlia. We'll be highlighting her murder for our panels to assess how they may handle someone who has died in that manner. So let's meet this episode's embalmers. Well, here we are with our panel of embalmers, guys. We have Faith, That Mortuary Professor, and John T. Hill, who you guys have seen. Both of these guys have been in a lot of my other videos. Go ahead and introduce your guys, where you're at kind of in the country and some of your past experience and stuff.
Sure. Go ahead, John.
Ladies first, please. Go ahead, Faith.
Oh, well, in that case, okay. I'm Faith. I've been doing videos with Kari for a long time now. I'm sure many of you have seen me before on some other things. I've been a licensed embalmer for almost 20 years. I am currently the program director of a mortuary school where I teach all subjects, including embalming and restorative art. And I mean, that about sums it up. I've been in the industry my entire adult life, embalmed thousands and thousands of cases, I'm sure, in many different states, seen all kinds of things, and now I get the pleasure to teach other people how to do it.
Yeah. What about you, John?
John Hill, and I'm based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And I'm an undertaker, licensed funeral director, and embalmer here. I'm also licensed in 4 other states, working on 3 other states right now as we speak. I am also a mortuary professor at Gupton Jones College and Mid America College, and then peer schools. And then I'm also a trade embalmer. I own Hill Mortuary Service and Seminars, and we have the privilege of helping a lot of local firms in this area with embalming and restorative art cases. And also work full-time here at the funeral home. This is my office where I'm sitting at. We just had a funeral today. That's why I'm dressed up. I did take the bow tie off, though. I did take that off today. And for this video, but yeah, that's about it for me, except I do also love cats. We have cats right behind the funeral home that we feed all the time. And I love Taco Bell. Taco Bell is probably one of my favorite late night snacks. As a matter of fact, I think I've got this on my machine. Taco therapy. We need taco
Nice.
therapy.
Yeah,
All right.
how there is not a Taco Bell like ad across everything you're on at this point. I don't know.
Oh, I love it. It's
Don't
the
do it for no
best
money.
ever.
Get a sponsorship.
I know, right? We
Don't
need a
advertise for
sponsorship
free.
for.
Well, I get that, but you know what? When you love something, it's
I
not
guess
work. It's
so.
not the yes. So I will do it for free.
You know,
All
John, I
right.
have to tell you this last week I did a big funeral for a local guy and the pastor is John Hill. So I thought about you the whole time. He's the cutest. He's in his 90s, this little
Oh,
guy. Love him. And his name's John Hill. So I was like, oh,
there's
John.
a lot of John Hills.
A
There's a lot of
couple.
places I go where I have to sign my name to it. And they said, "Which John Hill are you?" I said, "Yeah, I figured I have a very common name."
Well, today we are talking about Elizabeth Smart, who is the Black Dahlia. So Black Dahlia
No, I think it's Elizabeth Short.
or Elizabeth Short, sorry,
So I was
Elizabeth.
gonna say Elizabeth Smart was the girl that was kidnapped. I didn't think she
Oh my
died.
gosh,
Okay.
yeah. I didn't
Okay.
flip
I
over
was
to
like,
my
wait a
page.
minute.
Oh, it is Sunday. We're recording on a
It
Sunday.
is
Faith
Sunday.
and I
Yes.
just recorded 2 episodes of 6 Feet Under Exhumed, so we are full into recording mode today. But yes, Elizabeth Short. So she was born
Yeah.
1924, died in 1947. Just not even 20, she hadn't even turned 23 quite. So I'm going to read a little about her. I've sent you guys some photos. I don't share the photos on the video because YouTube will lock us down if we share descriptor pictures like that. But you can Google Black Dahlia Elizabeth Short murder. I will say when you Google Black Dahlia, there is a band that will come up a lot in the search as well. But so Elizabeth Short, also known as the Black Dahlia, was a California woman murdered in the Limert Park, a neighborhood of Los Angeles. Her case became high publicity because of the gruesome nature of the crime. It super mutilated, bisected at the waist, so completely almost cut in half. The body was just a few feet off a sidewalk and was very posed. So it became a hot conversation topic because it was very purposeful. Of course, the woman out walking thought she saw a mannequin, which we hear all the time. You know, I listen to like
Even
morbid
100 years ago,
podcasts,
it was a
right?
mannequin.
As, oh my gosh, it's a mannequin.
Who's leaving
Um,
mannequins? Who is
I
somebody like,
know.
have you
Girls
ever
love
found
that
a
many
mannequin?
mannequins. So the wild part is all the numerous cuts all over her, but there was no blood at the scene. So she was very clearly killed elsewhere. Her body moved and positioned how she was. The autopsy showed she died from repeated beating to the face. The blood loss and the cutting was all done post-mortem. Completely severed at the waist, drained of blood, which made her very pale. Medical examiners determined she'd been dead for around 10 hours prior to the discovery, leaving her time of death either sometime during the evening of January 14th or early morning hours of January 15th. So she was not out there very long, which does play into some of the conversation we'll have in a little bit. She had been completely washed. Her face had been slashed from the corners of her mouth to her ears, which is a very known depiction from this case, is the way that her face looked, giving her kind of this Glasgow smile, if you know what that is. She had cuts all over her body. Parts of her flesh had been taken away. Very destructive what was done during this. She had been posed, hands up over her head, arms bent at angles, her legs spread apart, and her torso and her bottom half were separated. Let me see what other notes I have that are a little different. She was very small, just 5'5", 115 pounds, so very slight. She had ligature marks on her ankles, wrist, neck, lacerations all over, lacerations on her arms, a lot on her arms and upper chest, which if you listen to a lot of cases often means like defensive wounds that she maybe was intersecting or kind of battling with someone. But she did have little bruising, which showed that it had been performed probably right before death occurred. Skull not fractured, a lot of bruising. I think the skull not fractured is a big thing when it comes to us doing restorative, that her skull was completely intact. It was a lot of just tissue damage, the cuts, the bruising, things on her face. So things to consider is dismemberments, facial abrasions, insect activities, things like that. So let's get into hypothetical. And what we do is hypothetically talk about if we had her come into our care, she would have been autopsied. So that on top of problems that we've talked about, the dissection, you know, a lot of people say, can we even embalm someone who has any kind of dismemberment or body parts missing? Faith, what would be your answer for that?
So I'm going to say something kind of weird, but I tell my students this all the time. I'd take an autopsy case every time over a straight case or a non-autopsy case because you can see it all, right? There's
Yeah.
not really going to be any surprises at that point. And so, you know, having already, I mean, we usually don't get people that are cut in half. That's maybe a time or two in a career thing.
Yeah.
But you know, dismemberments are more common, but they're still not terribly common, I wouldn't think, unless you're in a really high volume, you know, kind of place doing trade work, you know, maybe it is more common. But so my first thought is this is actually good for me as an embalmer because these are the kind of cases that I would choose, which I guess might seem weird to the public, but when
The
you think about it,
challenge.
It's a challenge, but also as far as, when you're talking about distribution of the chemicals through the body, you're not asking the chemical to go from one place to everywhere perfectly and evenly. You're getting to control where it's going in every individual part, the face, even, I mean, an individual arm, an individual leg. So to me, I feel like you could get a better, more complete embalming just because of that fact. So for me, I'm already going, okay, this is going to end up a well embalmed body.
Yeah.
That's where my mind goes first.
What do you think, John? What would be your first thought?
First thought of just taking care of the case in general.
Well, like you've got this two pieces of a body. Like, is there even probability that you can have a viewing that you could have,
Oh,
something
absolutely.
when you have like someone like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Even though she has been dismembered, that can be taken care of. Of course, you embalm everything separately. You don't put her back together until after the embalming has been completed. And looking at these pictures, this was in January, you said?
Correct.
So if this was in January and she had only been dead, they said approximately about 10 hours, she probably was not in terrible condition because it was probably very cold outside. By the time they found her, maybe not hardly any insect activity because of the cold weather being in the winter. Also, my
It's
main
Los Angeles, so it might be,
It is still
but
in January, probably
but
70s,
be,
still,
80s. I don't know.
January is still pretty cold, even
yeah,
there.
overnight it'll be down
Um,
there.
but even with as I look at the pictures here, her main issue is obviously the soft tissue on her face, but her eyes are there, her nose is properly proportioned, and the main lacerations can all be taken care of with our professional services. And,
Yeah.
the only thing I would say, and I haven't, there's not close ups of the rest of her body,
No.
but obviously the face is the most key important part. But, blunt force trauma to her face like that, the only issue I would be careful of, and it's just how you control your injection, is swelling and things of that nature as you inject into her face to make sure that everything is probably preserved. But I would at 120, 1,000% agree with Faith that this is very much a very viewable and very probable case for viewing. Absolutely.
This, in my opinion, looking at the face picture, this isn't really a terribly difficult case, I wouldn't think. I mean, I've seen much, much, much worse many times as far as from a true restoration standpoint. I mean, like you said, the skull is intact, the facial bones. I can't really tell. It looks like one side of the face there might be maybe some fracturing of the facial bones. I can't tell, but it doesn't look extreme if there is, or maybe it's just sunken in. It's hard to really tell. But it's mostly just, I mean, there's some punctures or so few wounds, dehydration, there's lacerations. This is mostly a cosmetic job, honestly,
Exactly.
in my opinion. Yeah. So when I look at it, that's what I say. It might sound weird, but I don't want to say, oh, that's no big deal. But for me as an embalmer that likes autopsy cases because I like the control that it gives you, it in my opinion, always ends up a better embalmed body because of that. I think, okay, this is going to be pretty straightforward and it'll turn out pretty well.
And I always like to say you embalm the parts and pieces. So, if the leg is cut off, you embalm the leg and you can reattach. You can reattach the torso in the base, or you can, to me, that's a super hideable injury,
Totally.
dissection when the torso has been, cut in half, because you can maybe close up or, seal off each part, but put them together under clothing that you don't even have to reattach per se, unless were able to easily do it. And then it's all hideable under clothing. So same with, a decapitation, which we've done in one case. I can't remember which one we did that in, where you can attach the head to the neck again with, put a dowel rod in, suture it up, and you embalm the head, you embalm the torso, and just put them back together later. So it's doable, which seems like the biggest thing because the body was in pieces, but yet you just kind of put them back together like a little puzzle. It's not like it's, zip snappy and it's the easiest thing ever, but I mean,
it's labor intensive, but
it
from a
is.
difficulty standpoint in the kind of cases that we have to do, I would say that there's many, many more difficult cases we regularly do than this one
Yeah.
would be for an experienced embalmer because like I said, the facial injuries are fairly superficial. It's mostly going to be a cosmetic job. And the dismemberment, it's really just half, right? And plus an autopsy,
Mm-hmm.
it's really nothing extra than an
If they did
autopsy.
a full autopsy,
Well, let's
you know,
assume they did. I
you
don't know what they did at
assume
the
because
moment.
autopsy can just be a topical, it can be
Sure.
just a toxicology draw, and that's considered an autopsy. And so, we assume that it's like the cranium is opened, the skull is open, the chest has a Y incision or a straight incision, and to get in there to be able to see. I like when you have head trauma if the skull is open because you can
Hmm.
get in a little bit easier.
Yeah.
I've had car accident
Absolutely.
victims and their heads were just crushed and there was no autopsy. And it's
Yeah.
like without having that open to get in there to try, it's hard to do unless you get the family permission. You open the skull, which is just super labor intensive, and everybody doesn't want to, if the funeral home does charge for that extra hours, they don't want to pay for that or whatnot. But you can only do so much when you're just looking from the exterior if the skull is damaged. It sounds like hers was intact, which is beautiful. Like John was saying, her proportions are all there.
Mhm.
The swelling of the tissue, I think, is what you're going to get. What would you do, John, to try to keep from that happening? Because that tissue on her face is very badly bruised, damaged. Why is it going to swell, and what would you do to try and keep it from swelling?
Well, just like with any type of trauma to the face or anywhere when we're alive, you have all the blood that clots in that area and you have inflammation, right? It's the same thing at death when there's all that happening. You have all of those bruising, which is basically blood clotting underneath the tissue, which means when you start injecting, it's going to expand, correct? So the best way to treat that is you can do different types of injection methods, the way that you can do a pulsating injection to where as you inject your arterial solution into the face, it gives a burst, but then it eases back to where it really penetrates, but then it eases back. Some would probably want to do more of a higher index solution. That way you don't have to inject so much fluid into the face and so much preservative. That way that you're getting everything that you need to with that. Some may want to do more hypodermic embalming, and some would want to maybe do outside of the regular arterial embalming, do topical embalming, which is there are certain gels and things of that nature that could really help the skin on the outside as well. So there's just different methods like that you could utilize. Me personally, I would try obviously arterial injection first, injecting both of the carotid arteries, and then go at a very, very slow pace and make sure I have the proper chemical solution. Maybe try to do some pulsating, things of that nature, and going from there. And just a tidbit here. I looked up what the weather was in Los Angeles during that year,
Look at
For
you.
you. Good job.
and it was at the lowest 38 degrees.
Okay.
Wow, how nice. Couldn't that
So I
good temperature for us.
Farmersalmanac.com. No.
yeah,
Yeah, we like
and it was
that.
actually the coldest of that year in January the 16th. The next day was the coldest at 31 degrees, but it was very cold early that morning. It was 38 degrees. I say very cold. It's
Mm.
not cold for you all.
No,
and
we're
uh,
12
and,
here, this
and
weekend.
it's cold here for us. It's 20 something degrees here, but for Los Angeles, that was pretty cold, 38 degrees. And
Yeah.
so I think the body itself being dead for 10 hours and in that type of climate, I don't think it was in a very bad deterioration
And
point.
especially
But
being so drained from what they said, like they're just a lot of blood loss and that being
mhm.
done elsewhere in a controlled environment and then placing the body outside. And who knows, it could have been there just for 20 minutes. It could have been there, it may not have been outside for very long at all, which is, um, I can't, how they did that without anybody walking by at that moment and stuff. And the crazy part of this case, that's not solved. This is still an unsolved
Yep.
case. People have come forward and said, well, I think my dad did it. I think, there's all these theories, but this has never been solved. I could not find whether anybody even viewed her. The funeral was very small, just her. I think it was three immediate family members, and like there was two people. They didn't know if they were reporters or police officers or something. It was a very small graveside service. You can find pictures of the graveside service and the family leaving, but I don't know that anybody ever really viewed her or not. So we don't know that side of it. Maybe that information is out there. I just could not find it when hunting for it. But I think, we talk about there's so much we can do with presentation. In that photo, her hair is all a mess. We talk about, doing a good bath, really seeing, how much is just dried blood that's on her, get her hair all brushed out. She was always a very done person, so to have a lot of makeup on her would not be abnormal. So to do some wax work and a heavier cosmetic wouldn't be probably unheard of for what she would have maybe done regardless. And do a lot of big hair and kind of distract you maybe from it a little bit. And so it's one of those, who is it, Vernie, who says they don't have to be perfect, just perfectly recognizable, just perfectly presentable or whatever.
Viewable, acceptable, and recognizable.
Yes. So they don't have to be perfect. They're not going to look like themselves. But for the family to walk into the room and say, that's my daughter, or, that's the goal, is to give them that recognizable features and that acceptable viewing moment. I know I had a burn case where did a lot of restorative. I thought it was going to be a train wreck, but they walked in and they were like, oh my God, that's our, that's them. And it was like, that's all you want, I think, at the end of the day, is that they can see who their loved one was and that connect to it a little bit.
And that's the value of what we do.
Yeah.
That's the main benefit and value in that, especially with this lady here, the Black Dahlia, because none of her family knew she was going to die like this.
No.
Nobody would have ever guessed that this would happen to her. How many times have we served families that they could not believe how their child died, how their spouse died, how someone close to them died? Not just traumatically, but the big deal is unexpectedly. They did not know the last time they saw them, that was the last time.
Yeah.
And so the biggest deal to us is knowing that we can give them that last time to where they can see them. And that's a big deal for their closure, for their acceptableness, because if they couldn't see her, if they didn't have the opportunity to get the chance to know that that was her and view her, they would always be wondering. They would never have that in their mind. So that's the biggest value that we do in funeral service for the viewing, is giving the families that opportunity for that final farewell, that not necessarily closure, so to speak, but they accept the reality of death and that that's their loved one and they move forward.
I do think that, and John, I bet you'll agree with this, most families expect worse than what they see, or they should. I don't want to say they should expect worse, but if we're doing our job, most of what they've conjured up in their head is going to be very, very different. They're going to be very relieved with what they see, and in almost all cases. In this particular case, I'm just, I'm kind of thinking back about what John was saying about the head and looking at this picture again. You're gonna, I think your biggest problem here is going to be dehydration. I mean, the blood being out of the body that's good for us. I mean, as embalmers, we want that. Our fluid needs somewhere to go, and we're not going to have clotting issues. We're not going to have that bacteria in the blood, still in there. That's a good thing. But also, you've lost fluid now for how long? And so I think you're going to be more prone to dehydration, and you can see that in the face. The lips, especially, look incredibly almost desiccated, and so that's going to be something you're going to have to do some kind of restorative surface pack or something on that, clearly. But I've always been a pulse embalmer. I've always embalmed on pulse all the time, every time, and that seems like so many people don't do that. So to hear John say I might use pulse on the head, I'm going, I do that every time in every case. I guess I don't. Isn't that interesting?
Our natural bodies.
Yeah.
Moving blood.
I don't know. It's just it's for me. It's like you're in there. It's like ding, ding, dink, dink. It almost like calms me down a little bit. I don't know
Exactly.
what
I
it is.
think you just like the TikTok.
Yeah, maybe so, maybe so. But I was like, yeah, pulse. I mean, that's yeah. But I think dehydration really is going to be your issue. So you're going to need to make sure that that fluid is going into the face and rehydrating it, and giving it, plumping it back up as much normally as it can. You may have to do some tissue building in this just because of that.
Absolutely.
Her
Yeah.
eyes, I don't know. You'd have to see how they would come up. They do look sunken in this picture. But again, all of those wounds you can clean as best you can, and you need to have firm dry tissue, right? So uh, for me, someone, this isn't my statement, this is from someone else. I'm not sure who, or I'd credit them, but I don't remember. But some embalmer once told me there are embalmers that give the body all that it can handle, and embalmers that give the body just what it needs. And I've always been
Oh,
an embalmer that gives the body what it needs, and there's other people that embalm give it all it can take. And so for me, I would give it what it needed until it didn't need anything else, and then I would stop. I mean, are we burying in 2 days? Is she going to be going around the world like Lincoln for 3 weeks? There's a big difference there. But regardless of that, firm dry tissue is what you really really want to end with. And for her, you might, in my opinion, want to temper exactly how firm and dry you want that tissue, because you're already facing dehydration in that face, and those, and especially around that laceration. No matter what you do, you can be the best suturer. You're most likely going to have to trim some of that. That's going to be
Absolutely.
dehydrated or desiccated tissue. And then not only that, now you have to wax over it. So you
Hmm.
don't want too much, because you've got to build that back to be a natural form, right? So if I'm cut, from here to here, and I've got a trim tissue, and now I've got to suture it, even if I lose half an inch,
that's a
that's
lot.
it's a lot, right?
Yeah.
And now, if I've embalmed too much or given it all it can take, I'm already up to here, right? And it's jagged. Now I've got to add wax. So I don't have that natural, you know, there's kind of a flatness here of your face if you look at it from the angle. So you don't want to give like a, big cheek and jowl thing here, because you have to remember when you're embalming, especially a face, what else you still have to do, and account for that. Because if we know we have to add a lot of wax, we probably don't want, we want to be really careful that we're not swelling or, over plumping with our fluid, because we still have to add all of that and make that a natural form too.
Have you guys ever made, oh, go ahead, John.
No, I was going to just add to, not really much add to what Faye said, but I really appreciate what she said about giving the body what it needs. That is huge. I've also embalmed that way as well. We got to remember that the chemicals that we use, the professional fluids that we have, we got to trust those. We got to know those. And so the chemicals that I know that I trust and use, I know I don't have to so much give it all that it can handle, because in the next few days, even if the body
Mhm.
were to stay out for several weeks, I don't want her looking like Leatherface
Mhm.
in the next several weeks. Even if you use moisturizer, because what some people don't realize is, oh, I made sure that they can last forever. Well, what are they going to look like though in the next
Right.
several days?
Well,
And
Mommy.
the
it's like when
embalming
you go to Taco Bell, right? And you fill your cup and you stop when it's 3/4 because it keeps working. Your embalming fluid keeps
yes,
work. Just because you shut that machine off doesn't mean it's done embalming. You
that's
gotta,
We
right?
that's
need the
exactly
book
right, and
on
that's what
of
I was going to
Taco Bell
say.
analogy for
That's right.
embalming, because I have
We'll get
mine
some
and
more
now there's
Taco Bell.
another one. We're gonna start a whole book on it.
Well, it's like I'll put it to you like this: the formaldehyde and your embalming solutions continue to work in the body even after you embalm the body. Correct? Just like Taco Bell, you put a mini fire sauce on the taco, but it's still going to continue to work after that, right? It's the same thing with the embalming. So that's why I really appreciate what you said, Faith, about giving the body what it needs, because you trust your chemicals. And I know that what I have given to her it's going to help her, but also it's going to make sure to, what I try to do is I want to make sure that as soon as I'm done post embalming, I want the body to kind of stay that way and make sure there's plenty of moisturizer on the face, plenty of humectant on the face, because I could care less, so to speak, what everything is underneath. I would love for it to be dry, desiccated, whatever underneath, but I want that outside to look right, the skin, to make sure it's still a little bit even pliable, because you can still have pliability on the skin and it's firm and embalmed as well. So,
Not
yeah,
everybody has to look like a grapefruit or a cantaloupe, right?
no,
We
and
get that like,
they
gosh.
don't have to be.
Yeah.
Rock. Yeah.
Let me tell you this, when I was an intern, I don't know if you had this experience, when I was an intern a long time ago, and this might have been the part of the country, I won't say most people know where I'm from, but I was told if you can't knock on the abdomen, they're not well embalmed.
And there's some people just won't get firm. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter
if
what you
you
put in
can't,
them.
if
It's just
after
not gonna
embalming, if you
happen.
can't like knock on the abdomen and hear it knock, they're not well embalmed.
Well, and there's kind of giving some context to it. There are embalmers who will
And
make
that's not true.
3 gallons of fluid, same fluid for everybody, whether they're 90 pounds or 300 pounds. They'll pump all 3 gallons in. That 100-pound body may only need 2 gallons, depending. So that's kind of what we mean in some essences is there are embalmers who are going to just give them all they can because they got to run 3 gallons through them, which I hate that kind of phrasing, but that's what they say.
Hmm.
And if they're 300 pounds, they may need more than 3 gallons,
Yeah.
but it's like, no, I'm just going to do my standard every time case. This is how I embalm. And it's not well embalming. Sure, there's some preservation there, but you can over embalm, you can under embalm. And so that's kind of the difference of give them what they can take or do what they
Well,
need.
there's a difference between a fluid pusher and an
Yeah.
embalmer.
Yeah.
There's a difference. Anybody can eventually raise a vessel. Anybody can, quote, find out the skills of doing the work of what we do, but that doesn't make him an embalmer.
No.
Just
No,
because
I
you
mean,
can, quote,
no.
embalm, that doesn't make you an embalmer.
No, we talk about embalming being a science and an art, but there's also an ethical component to it that I feel like, I know all of us are educators and I know we talk about that, but I don't know that we talk about that a lot as a profession. And, just because you can, does that mean you need to or you should? And some of those, and I see this a lot. No, not coming for trade embalmers, John, but I see that a lot in trade embalmers because they're a volume business, right? They want to have
Absolutely.
they want to have a algorithm that they use. They want to get in, get out, and on to the next because that's how they make money. Anybody that's paid on
Right.
a per case basis needs to be efficient and kind of have a process for sure. But when you're able to really be able to take your time and know what the body needs and give it what it needs and only what it needs, in my opinion, is an embalmer is the most ethical way to embalm. And sometimes it needs a heck of a lot, and that's part of it too. It's not to say that it
Absolutely.
doesn't require that. Sometimes it absolutely does. But I think that the really good embalmers out there, and there's a lot of great embalmers out there, really understand that each case is unique and each case does have different factors and each case does have different requirements and there really is no one size fits all. So like John was saying for this one, with those facial injuries, you've got to make sure that whatever you're doing isn't when if you stop embalming tonight, when you go back in the morning, you don't you gotta know what you're doing tonight to understand what it's gonna give you when you go back in the morning to work with to then
Absolutely.
cosmetize and
Yeah.
and you don't
And
it
with her being outside too,
yeah.
I will say this, like, in seeing her in the pictures, I don't think she needs like the harshest, strongest, hardest solution to take care of her. But
Mhm.
yet there are some subtle things that I believe would need to be added to that, because even though it was cold outside, she was still outside. There's
Mhm.
still some bacteria stuff from being outside. So she would need some type of tissue gas inhibitor, things of that nature. So, but you can add those certain types of chemicals and certain types of solutions to your arterial solution, and she's going to be just fine. She will be just fine.
Well, I'm looking at that picture. You can see that, I mean, her lower half and our upper half are completely separate. And the intestines are out and gone. So we have this exposure to insects that you don't see that happens very quickly that you could next morning come in and she's covered in maggots or she's covered in something else that you don't see it first thing. So being able to treat this fully exposed abdomen on both sides of the halves is going to be, it's not like you're going to aspirate like normal per se. If they collected all that during autopsy, that would be off that you'd treat differently too. But you're going to have all this exposed area that you usually wouldn't. So it's not like we can just
Yeah.
dry that out. We're going to have to treat
No,
it
you would. I mean, you would treat
hypo.
oh yeah, you would treat the viscera with a strong, solution for sure. And we do just about
Absolutely.
every time. I mean,
Yeah,
and then, for your cavity, I mean, at least for me, yeah, you're gonna hypo, you're gonna use gel if you like the gel. I would use that. You're going to use the compound. You're gonna pretty much, want to use everything at your disposal for that cavity because of those reasons. But that's why I said earlier, the fact that she's would have been autopsy, that helps us as
Absolutely.
embalmers.
yeah, they would have cleaned out and
Yeah,
done some of that collecting because if the
we would have a space in there to treat that we wouldn't have
correct.
to create ourselves.
Right.
Mhm.
All that viscera had been out in the grass and everything, and they've
Mhm.
collected all that and put it into a bag for us, hopefully. So that's helpful. We can treat it there. Um, oh, I had just such another. Well, and I think one sad thing about this is not saying this is what happened, but I'm sure we've all known an embalmer that would be like, she's not viewable. We're just going to leave her in
Oh
the
yeah.
bag, not do anything, put her in the casket, and we're going to have a graveside service and not do anything. And
See
that
that? You're
that
you're
poor
so right
person,
about you. Oh,
that there's
you're
people who
so
are not
right.
going to attempt, they're going to dissuade, they're going to say it's not possible. The kind of injuries, not so much the, even with the face, car accidents, train is where I think I've seen that midsection
Mhm.
dissection probably the most would be almost like a train or plane or something like that, where they got ran over by something very sharp, like
Yeah.
a, rail car or something. Um, have you guys, I was going to say, have you guys ever made concrete out of the incision sealer and Aran Alpha
No.
I
in
have.
wounds? I
Mm-mm.
think it's one of the most magical things ever. It's a chemical reaction. So Faith to try
And
like
it looks like smoke is about to erupt
it
like a
does.
volcano.
It you feel like a chemist, like a mad
Are you
scientist.
doing that inside the incision?
No, so like look like on the facial, think of one of the facial cuts, abrasion. Like if it's deep and open, you can't suture it together. It's soft tissue. You dry it out the best you can, but sometimes wax still is hard to attach to it. So
Right.
if you take the incision sealing powder and
Mhm.
you place it in there, and then you drop in some Aran Alpha, which is what we use. It's the Mortuary Science um,
Super glue.
super glue. You put a couple drops, and quickly you have to kind of rub it to smooth it down, and it'll start smoking, and it turns hard like concrete. But it gives you a rough, dry surface to attach the wax to, and it kind of seals up that area.
Can you make it like smooth though, or does it get all
Not
like
perfectly.
bubbly?
Nope, it's bumpy so that when you wax over it, it sticks to it.
You have to
All
apply some
right.
type of wax on top
Over.
to
Yeah.
smooth it out.
It's magical. You'll have to do it in labs
I'll have to try
sometime when
it.
you have.
See, I learned something new. This is why I love this.
I couldn't even tell you where I learned that years ago, and I've only used it, dozen or so times, but in that perfect situation, it's one of the few things I think that really gets in and hardens for you to attach to because there's there's
Yep.
wound wax, which is a thicker wax, but then you put it in and it
It's
all
just, yeah.
sticks to itself and then it
Yeah.
pulls out of the thing. And this, I feel like the wax adheres to better. Um,
Mm.
That's good.
so
I'll try that.
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I think it's, I hate to say fun, but to be able to do
It
things
is fun.
that
It's
are,
okay to say it's
they're
fun. It's okay to
magical to be able
have
Fun
the feel
and
thing.
funeral. Fun and
right.
funeral.
But the guys, that's part of it, right? Why if you don't find excitement and don't take pride in what you're able to do that other
Yeah.
people aren't. Think about how many of us out there in the United States are that can do these things compared to the total population. We're a small number,
Hmm.
right? There's a small number of us that can look at
Yeah.
that picture and go, "Oh, that's okay, that's fine,"
Yeah.
right? And like you said, even people within it would absolutely have told the family that that was unviewable. And the truth is, in my opinion, which is why I said this, is that is not anything that gives me any kind of pause as a
Yeah.
as an embalmer. That's a fairly, I don't want to call it an easy case because it is labor intensive, but it's not a
Right.
terribly complicated case compared to other things. And
Yeah.
so, but you know, to be able to have the knowledge and the skill and the experience and to be able to do those things for me is such a source of pride that I'm okay saying to the public, yeah, it is fun and
Yeah.
it's you know, if you don't enjoy it and get, you know, that pride out of the things you can do, you probably ought to step out, right?
I agree with that.
Well, and
How
this,
many times have
oh, go
you
ahead.
all had somebody at a funeral say, I couldn't do what you do? How do you do what you do? I had
Yeah.
someone tell me that today at the funeral we were working. How did you get into the funeral
Yeah.
profession? They said business. And I was like, well, I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, I know I can look it up how to do it, but I don't understand how you do it. How are you able to do it? And I always say, well, the key is it's not about being morbid. It's not about the death. It's about the living. We do what we
Yeah.
do to help those have that closure that they
It's
need.
exactly that. I mean, we're not going, oh, good, someone got injured, and like, it's not that.
Exactly.
We're not happy for what happened to the person, but I think that we are, for many of us at least, I guess I can only speak for myself. We are, we are proud of what we're able to do for families.
I'm
And
pleased when
that
That's
I
it.
have
is,
a solution or
yes,
can
we
provide something to a
that is a
family.
service to people that is a very niche thing that we have put in a lot of hours and practice and, you know, difficulties to learn. And there's an emotional aspect of it. I mean, you know, it's an art, it's a science, and then there's an emotional piece to it
Mhm.
for us too. And to know that we can give that to our community is why we work for less pay than people think, or why we, you know, work till we're 80 when maybe we could have retired at 65 because it's a, I don't like to use the word ministry because I don't know, I think that word sometimes is used in a strange way, but it really is. It's a service for us that we give to our communities. And so to know that we can do that, I think it's okay to say that we're proud of that and that we enjoy being able to do that for people.
Well, it's nice.
Passion.
There you
Yes,
go. There
passion.
you
Passion.
go. Yeah.
Well, and I think the beautiful thing now is that, back in that day, back in what, 1947 or something, whatever it was, for that embalmer to get her and to have somebody to reach out to, not common, not as common. I can now pick up a cell phone and call
Yeah.
one of a couple dozen people across the country who have experience, knowledge that I could say, hey, I have a case, huge, in the media. I need to make sure this is right. I want support during this,
Yeah.
and I need all the knowledge I can get going into this because this isn't something we each deal with every day as embalmers. And if it was a small town person, they may have never encountered anything at this level, even though from some things we've seen, it's not as bad as it could be. But to somebody who was maybe newer in the business or didn't have a lot of exposure to different type of cases, it could be the most radical case they'd encountered. So back then, they couldn't just like email their buddy or,
Yeah.
reach out to many people. It wasn't as much what we did. And so it's nice now that we're at that stage because I know I had a bad one and was like, John, John, I just hold my hand through the phone. Like, tell,
But isn't that part of what is so I don't I keep using want to say the word enjoyable and I know that that doesn't sound right. That's so
Fulfilling.
thank you. Thank you. That's John's my translator. We're like that SNL skit with Mean Obama or whatever. Um, but that's what's so fulfilling and satisfying about thank you, John, is that I will never know all there is to know. I probably won't even know half there is to know. I could do it every day until I die myself, and someone will always know something I don't know. Every single embalmer, even ones that haven't been doing it as long, know something that I don't know. And I think that that
Absolutely.
is so fulfilling, and just it keeps you motivated and it keeps you going, because at least for me, if you ever get to a point where you think you know everything and you think you have nothing left to, nothing else to know or nothing else to learn, then go learn something new. Learn
Yeah.
something else, get out
Absolutely.
of the prep room
Well,
and go.
every body we get keeps getting
Yeah.
different, with medical advancements, with new kinds of cancers and drugs that people are taking,
Mhm.
recreational or
Yeah.
other, it changes the body composition. It changes what's happening as we keep people living longer. Bodies are deteriorating prior to death. We're encountering more challenges there. Everything that we put in our bodies and do with our bodies and everything changes so much. So it keeps getting new and different. And just when you think you've seen so much, you're like, oh, okay, that wasn't on my bingo card for this year, but here we go, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
it keeps challenging. I've seen so many crazy things. I don't want to talk specifics just because they would be recognizable for
Yeah.
people, but it's amazing what the human body can do and what we do with our bodies when, let's say you're missing, you cut off your thumb. And so you take your toe and attach it to your hand, and there's your new thumb. And it's like, what? And then you get that person in your preparation room and you're like, their toe's missing, but why does their thumb look weird? And then you realize what's happened and you're like, whoa, that's, wild. And so many crazy things like that we get to see that are just medically amazing. Our bodies are just
Yeah.
unbelievable. Now, part of this story is also the media frenzy around it. And I think we've all worked those cases where the media, and this was Tinseltown in the heightened days, she was considered a little free woman, kind of liked
Hmm.
to go out and meet people a lot. And so they thought she was a little, um, I don't know,
Promiscuous.
promiscuous in that
Risque,
way, little putting herself out there, the way she dressed and stuff, because she was
little
trying to
risque.
be
Risque is the
risque
word.
Okay.
a little for the times. And so there was a lot being said about her. These photos that are out there, if you see the photos from the crime scene, there is a line of what looks like reporters there that are right by the
Yeah.
body, able to, be taking stories and who knows what photos. So I can't imagine. I've gone through a death in my family that was in the media as it was happening, but
Hmm.
nobody was there taking photos. I didn't
Yeah.
have to worry about photos of, them out in the public
Yeah.
and online and everywhere from the death scene. And the mother, I can't imagine. So how she found out about this happening is the reporter called her and said, your daughter won a sweepstakes or something. We need to verify who she is and blah, blah, blah. And like got the mom all excited and then tells her daughter's been killed. And it was like the way they went about it was so cruel.
Absolutely. That's
But they
Oh,
knew
crazy.
who she
wow.
was. They verified through fingerprints because she had committed like a small crime or something prior. And so the FBI was able to tell who she was pretty quickly, which was nice. But then, yeah, notifying the mom, the media actually reached out and did it was terrible. And so having to go through such a public loss and such a brutal loss and then never having any finality to it. No, there's never closure, but any finality of who did this and why. I can't imagine that part. Have you guys had situations like that where it is a unknown crime or such a public death that you had to worry about media and things?
Public deaths, yes. I can't recall unsolved anything at the top of my head.
Same thing, Faith. Public
Yeah.
deaths, but nothing unsolved. Now we have had suspicions, of course, but nothing quote unsolved.
I've had two times where I met with the family, and it ended up that was the person that killed the person.
Exactly. That's what
Yeah.
I mean by
They were
suspicion.
found and arrested and all that. I don't think there was suspicion at that time, but no, I don't recall anything like unsolved kind of situations that I'm aware of.
I don't think I've had an.
Unless they were found to be, you know, homicides or whatever after the fact, and I don't know about it, which I guess is possible, but
I've had some child deaths that were unfounded as to what,
yeah,
let's say, happened, even though there was suspicions, but never found
yeah,
that anyone was convicted of
yeah.
the deaths. And then you meet with the parents, that kind of thing, which is hard because it kind of comes back that yes, they could have probably prevented this or they could have whatever. And it's hard to sit to the side and like be unbiased, I think, in some of those moments, especially when it's a child. But yeah, high profile. If there's reporters, that is when you will see me go mama bear like nobody else. If they try and like cross, I've had one time we were meeting, a young guy died. The family's going out after we made arrangements, and I look out and the news is there, and the reporter gets out to start coming towards the family. And I ran out. I was like, you get out of here. Like, get in your car. Are you effing kidding me? Like,
Yeah.
no, absolutely not. And but they draw the short end of the stick, and that's their job. So if they want to get paid and they want to move forward and advance themselves, they kind of have to be a bit vulture for the good story. So I get it, but I still makes me
Yeah.
I hate
That's
it.
a good funeral director protecting the family.
Dude, that's
There
the
you go.
only time I get like super out of character, out of funeral director character for me. I think just because I just want to protect my families that, you're taking care of. And the media, most of the time, are pretty good. They'll come. I've had them where they come and they ask for like a funeral, one of the folders, or they ask what they can video. And so if we know they're coming and they let us know, we okay things by the family, we'll give them a funeral folder that they can show on the news or whatever it may be. But, a lot of it by the point of the funerals now, it's not as much reporters as it is other people wanting to post things for social media and stuff. And it's having to put up signs that say, absolutely don't take photos, don't do this, don't do that, because it's all about who can put out the story first and who can post about it first because they want to get the attention about it first. And that's sad. It's sad
That's
that
something, God, that's
making
something
it about themselves.
for you and I, Carrie. I mean, when we started there, we didn't have cell phones. And now, like, I think about like the new generation of funeral directors, like that's the norm for them is like everybody has a cell phone and like it wouldn't even, it's hard to even think still for me that like people could just take a picture of the body in the casket and they do and put it on TikTok. And you can't control that.
No.
And that
They
was
did it
just,
today.
yeah, but it's like, that just makes you as a funeral director feel really it's kind of a violation, really. But how do
I
you
feel like
stop
that's
it?
the situation where I would, if I anticipate, maybe that's like a situation where does a young person is talk to the family about it, make the sign, put up the sign, and that way, if we see anybody taking photos, we can remove them as
I
staff.
mean,
Like
what do
if
you do?
if
Have
we
a
have
staff person sit up there and watch and make sure nobody make them put their cell phone in a
take
basket
their
before
phone
they
and
go in?
smash
I
it.
don't know. I'm serious, but it's like, I mean, that's really something that's kind of new in funeral service in a way that we didn't have to deal with for at least in first 15 years of my career. There wasn't self people taking, and if you did, you had a Motorola Razor. It wasn't, we weren't having an iPhone where you could just go click.
We have even some
Yeah,
families, adults, where they say, "Is it okay to take a photo?" I'm like, "That's your husband. Go for it. Or that's
Yeah, well,
your
yeah,
yeah,
mom.
exactly.
Go
but then
right
you've got
ahead."
just like somebody's friend from
Rando.
weirdo can do it real quick. Ugh, I don't like that.
They do selfies with the individual
Yeah,
with the casket. I mean, with the individual, they'll just take it that we had that today, and the mom took pictures today, and the husband took pictures. I mean, it was just everybody was taking pictures today of her in
Or
the
they
casket.
set it up where they have somebody else take a picture of them looking all sad, looking upon the person, like creating, like hey, take a picture of me while I'm looking at them in the casket. Have a moment if you're having a moment. Why are you having someone take a photo creating a moment? Like, are you really sad? Because if
Right.
I
I
just,
think it's all right to take photos if it's your loved one or whatever, and that's cultural. There's cultures that do
oh
that,
yeah,
if you've
yeah,
ever, I know you know that, you guys know that, but it's just when it's like some ancillary person that's not closely, within the immediate family that like if I went to a if my friend from high school died and I went to the funeral, like I would never take a picture of them. It would never even come in my mind, but like now it's like they'll do that and put it on their social media. It's just such
it's
a
for attention seeking
ah
is what I think it
Absolutely.
is.
Social media crazy and influencing and all that. I agree with that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Any last thoughts on the Black Dahlia? We've had that one requested so many times, and I'm like, finally, all right, we're going to circle to it. We'll talk about the
I
Black
hope it's not
Dahlia.
disappointing for your viewers, but from an embalming and restorative art standpoint, it's fairly straightforward. I wish we had more to say about it, but
Yeah,
I guess that's a good learning, thing for, for your viewers. Just because something seems really bad doesn't mean it is. And the things that are really difficult for us, you wouldn't even speak, you can't even see it, right?
yeah.
It's the things you don't see that make our job difficult, right?
Well, it's like,
That's right.
if we had to list things that were probably challenging, like chemo drugs,
Tissue gas.
things that affect the body, that neutralize the embalming fluid that
Yes.
you can't see, you probably wouldn't even think about as being factors. Those are things that are challenging because they do so much, they work against what we're doing.
Yeah.
Some damage from accidents and things aren't, as challenging sometimes because they're
They're
consistent,
known to you. You can
a
see
little
it.
more predictable, if I
Yeah.
don't want to say the word predictable because they're all a bit different and such, but they're, I don't know,
Well, it's more known to you. You can
yeah,
see it,
it's
you
right
can plan,
there.
you have a much more thorough assessment and analysis
Yeah,
on what you can see rather than, what you can't with its
yeah.
inside the body. So,
Well, thank you guys for joining me. I always love chatting with you guys. Check out
yeah.
Faith, That Mortuary Professor on social media. You've got John T. Hill over on Facebook. Lots of content that they both post. And, half of John's is Taco Bell runs when he's late at night. I mean, how many
Taco Bell
bodies
and cats.
and cats, how many bodies do you embalm a year, would you say, John? Like last year?
I'd, ra- I'd rather not say. I will. The highest in my career was three, averaging three a day. I will say that. So you do the math,
Yeah,
360.
that's just
But
your experience level is so magnanimous, I think, compared to a lot of embalmers. And it's not, I know you don't like accolades, but it gives you, I think, such a distinct knowledge because of the exposure and experience you have, which is why I love you in on the conversations.
well, the best thing I will say is the most important thing I should say is it doesn't matter how many I do. It doesn't matter. They're not a number.
Yeah.
This is an individual. This is a person. This is a husband, a father, a loved one. That's a big deal. And it's not about the quote quantity, it's about the quality. And I was taught very early on you never rush because you can never redo this embalming again because this is a distinct, unique individual, unique to a family. And I always do my best to remember every time I embalm an individual, whether I embalm one person a day or maybe it's up to five or six a day, I will say, I will have this mentality that I am embalming this individual because the family has requested it. Somebody has asked for my services.
Mhm.
That's a big, big deal, especially nowadays where embalming and open viewings are become less and less. And we need to show again how valuable, how beneficial, and purposeful our work is to show families, hey, if it's done right, if it's done well, if it's done correctly, it can be an invaluable service that will help them throughout the rest of their lives while they're going through the darkest time and most difficult time of their life. So, so that's that's what keeps me going. That's what keep my drive going while we stay up late at night, grab some Taco Bell on the way, whatever, get fuel. But that's what keeps us going.
Well,
And
and what I love about you is it even the high volume is I know that like 3 days later, you're going to be like, I really hope Mrs. Smith is looking good for her loved one. Like, I know that
absolutely,
you are still thinking and hoping that everything is good with the bodies of the
I check
individual you
in with the
took care
funeral.
of because they
Yeah, I
aren't
check
just a
in.
number to you. And I love that because, like Faith was saying, some people are just fluid pushers, number wanting go, 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 go. And the leaving the place clean. I've had trade embalmers come in and I'm like, what did they what did they do in this
It looks
property?
like a crime scene itself. It
Oh
looks
my
like the
God.
Black
Yeah.
I'm like,
Dahlia happened today.
how did that get, it just,
Absolutely.
and they're not
Yep,
welcome
that's a big
back,
deal.
that's not acceptable. You leave the body clean, you leave the space clean, you respect the person, you keep them covered. If we come in and the
Absolutely.
body's uncovered, like, no, because they're people and they can't protect themselves. They can't do anything for themselves. So we need to respect them. But yeah. What were you going to say, Faith? I feel like you had one more thing you were going to say.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Oh, nice.
I mean, are you going to go through the list of things you love about me too?
I
Or
love
yeah,
so
no,
much
no,
about
no.
you. I love so much about you.
That's right.
Faith and
Uh-huh.
I met just about a year ago for the first time, I think, in person.
Oh,
And John and I too. We
okay.
met
Maybe we
all of
should.
us
Yeah, it
for the
was. We did.
Vegas was the first time I
Yeah, it
met both
was.
of you in person. So it'll always be special to me for that. It was fun. It's fun to meet people in person for the
It
first
is.
time, and it feels like you know them, and then you finally see them in person. It's like
And you
But it's
find out
not
they're
staying
like
in
five
Vegas.
foot ten, and
I
everybody's like, I'm like, oh my God, Gary, you're so tall. I'm like up to
That's
her
what people
armpit.
say is you're tall and you're so little. Like Faith is like a
I
little
know.
nugget.
I'm
She's
five
just a
feet
little
tall.
nugget. I want to put her in my pocket and
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
What'd you say,
well,
John?
I just said I'm glad that even though we all met in Vegas, it doesn't stay in Vegas. We're
No,
still.
gosh, no. Whatever I was sick with when I was there, you got sick too, John, when you were there.
I did. I certainly did. But we made it through. We made it through.
Yeah, it was exhausting. Well,
And it
thank
wasn't a hangover. Wasn't a hangover.
no. I wish I'd have had that much raging fun.
And
I
it wasn't too much Taco Bell that night either. Okay. So we're all good.
did. Did you eat at a Taco Bell there though?
No, I had plans, and then, but then that Sunday night it was, and I was in the hotel and yada yada yada. But we were
Where,
still able to do what we needed to there.
where's the
So
first Taco Bell in the country? Do you know?
I do. I think it's in California. I do believe that is the
I
case.
feel like there needs
But
to be a bucket list for you. Like you have
oh
to have
yeah.
the original Taco Bell somewhere.
I do have all of. They just went through the decades menu or whatever
Yes,
of what
yes.
started.
Yeah.
So I got all the cups, all the plastic
I
cups of
love
the
it.
decades and everything like that. So yeah,
That's
I'm good.
amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining. Thanks for checking back in with us on the Victims of Crime. Watch out for the next in the series. I've got 4 ready to go. We just gotta line up some more embalmers to film them. So I'm gonna keep rotating different embalmers so you guys get a good variety of who chats about the cases. If there's a case you want us to cover, shoot me an email, Kari@KariTheMortician.com, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Carrie. Blessings to you, Faith.